Welcome on the channel Voices of Reddit. Today we have an intriguing story about the
Am I the bad person for telling my stepmother-in-law I'm glad she can't have children? When my wife, Emily, was a teenager, her father remarried a woman named Linda after divorcing Emily's mother. Linda became Emily's stepmother, and from the beginning, their relationship was strained. Linda had significant health issues that eventually led to a hysterectomy. Before that, she and my father-in-law, Robert, had been trying to conceive. Linda was very open about how devastating it was to lose the ability to have children. She's been in therapy for years, but it's still a painful subject, so we make it a point not to bring it up. During the pandemic, Linda became a vegetarian. I have no problem with vegetarianism. In fact, I tried adopting a vegetarian diet myself a few years ago for health reasons but had to stop due to medical complications. The issue with Linda isn't her dietary choices but how aggressively she pushes them onto others. She frequently sends graphic videos of animals being slaughtered to family members, including one particularly disturbing video of cattle being processed. Because of her preachiness, Emily and I avoid having meals with her. I've also heard that she and Robert often eat in separate rooms due to their conflicting diets. 2 weeks ago, Emily and I were invited to a close friend's wedding. Our regular babysitter canceled on us at the last minute due to a family emergency. In a bit of a bind, we reached out to Robert and Linda to see if they could watch our two children, Jack, who is 8, and Sophie, who is 5. They had babysat once before without any issues, so we felt comfortable leaving the kids with them again. They agreed to come over to our house to watch them. Before we left, we reminded Robert and Linda that we had promised the kids burgers for dinner. Jack and Sophie had been looking forward to it all week. Robert nodded, assuring us it was no problem. With that settled, Emily and I left for the wedding feeling relieved. When we returned home late that night, the house was quiet, and the kids were asleep. Linda mentioned that everything went smoothly, and Robert apologized for turning in early, saying he'd been feeling a bit under the weather and had fallen asleep on the couch. We thanked them both for stepping in on such short notice, and they left. The next morning, however, we noticed something was off with Sophie. She was unusually quiet during breakfast, picking at her food and avoiding eye contact. When lunchtime came around, she burst into tears and refused to eat anything. Concerned, Emily and I tried gently coaxing her to tell us what was wrong, but she just shook her head and cried harder. Jack, seeing his sister's distress, finally spoke up. "Mom, Dad," he began hesitantly. "Grandma Linda showed us a scary video last night." Emily and I exchanged a glance. "What kind of video?" I asked softly. Jack took a deep breath. "We asked for the burgers you promised, but Grandpa fell asleep, and Grandma Linda said she wouldn't make them. When we kept asking, she showed us a video of cows being hurt and said eating meat is evil. She also told us that you, Mom, secretly don't want us to eat meat but are too afraid to tell us." Emily's face paled. I felt a surge of anger rising within me. "She said what?" Emily whispered. Jack nodded. Sophie got really scared. She couldn't stop crying. I didn't like it either. We spent the rest of the afternoon comforting our children. We reassured them that it was okay to eat meat and that neither of us wanted them to stop unless they chose to. We explained that people have different food choices and that's okay. But what Linda did was wrong. After we put the kids to bed that night, Emily and I decided to call Linda to confront her about what had happened. She answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful. "Oh, hello, how are my favorite son-in-law and daughter?" "Not great, Linda," I replied tersely. "We need to talk about what happened last night." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "We know you showed Jack and Sophie that video," Emily said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "The one of the cattle being slaughtered." Linda sighed dramatically. "Well, they were insisting on eating those horrible burgers. I thought it was time they learned the truth. You had no right to expose our children to something so graphic." I snapped. "They're 5 and 8 years old. I was just trying to help them make better choices." She retorted. "You should be thanking me. You're raising them on unhealthy, unethical food." I felt my temper flare. "We decide what's appropriate for our kids, not you. And you lied to them about Emily being against them eating meat." "Well, maybe she should be," Linda shot back. "You both should be more conscious of the impact you're having on the world." "That's enough," Emily interjected firmly. "You've crossed a line. Linda, we can't trust you around our children anymore." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I echoed incredulously. "You traumatized our children." She huffed. "If they're traumatized, it's because you're filling their heads with nonsense. I'm trying to educate them. I couldn't hold back any longer. You have no idea how glad I am that you can't have children, I said coldly. I'd pity any child that had you as a mother. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line before Linda hung up abruptly. Immediately, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me knew I had crossed a line by attacking her infertility, a deeply personal and painful subject for her. But another part of me felt justified, thinking about the distress she had caused my children. The next day, Robert began calling and texting us. He apologized profusely for falling asleep while babysitting but insisted that cutting them off from seeing the grandchildren was an overreaction. He was particularly upset about my comment to Linda, accusing me of mocking her inability to have children. He demanded that I apologize. I was torn. While I regretted stooping to such a hurtful remark, I couldn't shake off the anger I felt towards Linda. My wife agreed that although what I said was harsh, Linda had overstepped in a significant way. Over the following days, we noticed lasting effects on our children. Sophie refused to eat meat, fearing she would be evil if she did. She picked at her meals, and mealtime became a stressful ordeal. Jack was quieter than usual, and one night, I found him awake past his bedtime, staring at the ceiling. When I asked what was wrong, he admitted he couldn't get the images from the video out of his head. Feeling the weight of the situation, Emily and I decided we needed to take action. We sat the kids down and had an open conversation. We assured them that it was okay to have questions and fears and that they could always talk to us about anything. We also reiterated that Linda had made a mistake and that we wouldn't let something like that happen again. I also did some soul searching. I thought about my own family's history. Before my brother and I were born, my parents had lost a child, a stillborn daughter. It was a subject they rarely discussed, but I remembered the quiet sadness that would sometimes overtake my mother. I realized that using someone's pain against them, no matter how justified I felt, was wrong. I approached Emily and told her I thought I should apologize to Linda for my comment about her infertility. Emily agreed, sharing that while Linda had been out of line, stooping to personal attacks wasn't the solution. We both decided that while I would apologize, we would stand firm on our decision to cut off contact with Linda regarding the children. We called Robert and Linda that weekend. I began by apologizing to Linda. I'm sorry for what I said about you not being able to have children. I said sincerely, it was uncalled for, and I regret saying something so hurtful. Linda was silent for a moment before responding angrily. You think a simple apology makes up for that? She snapped. You humiliated me. I'm trying to make amends, I replied evenly, but we still need to discuss the consequences of your actions. She scoffed. Oh, so now you're punishing me for trying to help your children? You traumatized them, Emily interjected. You showed them graphic content without our consent and lied to them about how we feel. That's unacceptable. Linda began to raise her voice. I'm the only one who cares about their well-being. You're terrible parents for feeding them poison and pretending it's okay. At this point, Robert tried to intervene. Linda, please, let's all calm down. No, Robert, she shouted. They don't appreciate anything I do. It's awful that cruel, ungrateful people like you get to raise children when I can't. I felt a pang of sympathy but remained firm. We're ending this conversation now, I said. We wanted to resolve this peacefully, but it's clear that's not possible. We ended the call. Later, Robert contacted us separately. He apologized again for the situation and admitted that Linda's behavior was out of line. He asked if there was any way to fix things. We told him that while we couldn't allow Linda around the children anymore, we didn't want to cut him out of their lives. However, we set firm boundaries. He could visit the kids, but only without Linda present, and we wouldn't be leaving them in his care unsupervised. Robert agreed, expressing his regret and promising to respect our wishes. To show his commitment, he invited us for a family dinner at a steakhouse that Emily loved as a child, a place he hadn't visited since marrying Linda due to her dietary restrictions. We accepted the invitation, hoping to start healing the rift in some way. Reflecting on everything, I have mixed feelings. I regret making that hurtful comment to Linda. Attacking someone's personal pain is never acceptable, but I don't regret standing up for my children and protecting them from harm. As parents, our primary responsibility is to ensure their safety and well-being. So, am I the bad person for telling my stepmother-in-law I'm glad she can't have children? In that moment of anger, I said something cruel, and for that, I was wrong. But in the larger context of protecting my children from someone who traumatized them and showed no remorse, I believe I did what was necessary.